We're ready for you to get started if you're ready.
Okay, all right. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our seminar speaker, Dr. Ying Sun, who's an assistant professor in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Cornell University. Ying received her PhD in climate science at the University of Texas at Austin. She is an early career fellow of the Ecological Society of America and recently received a Group NASA Achievement Award for her contributions to the Orbiting Carbon Observatory 2 satellite project. And Ying is a leader in advancing satellite, UVA, and ground-based solar-induced chlorophyll fluorescence observations theory and mechanisms. If any of you have read any remote sensing papers related to SIF, you will have come across Ying's name and her work. She's really advancing that science. In today's seminar, her title is Earth Observations for Agricultural Monitoring, Harnessing the Synergy of Diverse Sensing Technologies from Field to Regional Scale. So it's a real pleasure to have you, Ying.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim, for your nice introduction, and also thank you very much for your invitation. So today I'm going to share a couple of papers that my student and postdoc have been working on in the past couple of years related to agriculture. So first of all, I would like to briefly introduce the overarching questions that my lab is currently pursuing. First, we would like to understand the mechanisms that control the interaction and feedbacks between the land and the atmosphere. So for the land, we work on both natural and managed ecosystems. Number two, we would like to incorporate our mechanistic understanding into Earth system models, and also try to use our mechanistic understanding to interpret the remote sensing observations. So given the audience here, I would like to focus on the agriculture systems and also focusing on the remote sensing monitoring. But if you're interested, I'm more than happy to discuss more about our work on the natural system and also our modeling work. There are four themes in general in my lab. Number one, we would like to understand the mechanisms and try to put this mechanism into theoretical equations. So here, the theories we are trying to advance are on photosynthesis, on solar-induced chlorophyll fluorescence, and also evapotranspiration. So we have papers published recently on using the satellite eco-stress to reconstruct the diurnal cycle of the land surface temperature and also evapotranspiration, and of course, a bunch of papers on fluorescence. Also, we developed a lot of data from the leaf level to the canopy level and to regional and global scales. If you are interested, we have more than 100 number of measurement of ACI curves, and also concurrent with PAM measurements for fluorescence. And we also have a canopy level measurement of fluorescence and added coherence over a cornfield. We also have a lot of UAV measurement of fluorescence and also hyperspectral under different combinations of irrigation and nitrogen fertilization treatments. We also develop a number of global fluorescence products using machine learning. And then another theme is that we would like to put our theoretical understanding into models. So here we primarily work with the UNCAR's community land model. And we also work with the crop growth model like DSAT to understand both the managed system and also natural systems. And finally, applications. We try to integrate our data and theory to understand the drivers underlying for example, this one is one study I'm going to talk in details today, is what are the drivers underlying the secular freshwater depletion in northwestern China. And this would have very important implication for policy making. And we were also using satellite measurement of fluorescence for social economic evaluations in Ethiopia, which has received a huge investment from World Bank to understand the social benefits of the land degradation restoration program, but the conventional approach is just too costly in terms of labors and also money. So that's why the satellite remote sensing is the only way to do this large scale evaluation. This paper was published in Nature Sustainability earlier this year. So today I'm going to talk about a couple of studies at the canopy level with our data and also application in north and western China. So number one, one question we are interested in understanding is what is a true global, true photosynthesis at the canopy scale and beyond. This is a paper published by my former postdoc, Oscara, in GIL a few years ago, and we use both synthetic simulations and the field data in our cornfield. So this is the image taken by a UAV in our cornfield. So from here, you can see there are two towers. One is the SIF tower, the other is the Cornell tower, both powered by solar panels. So here, what is the issue? The issue is that there's a long-standing challenge in quantifying the photosynthesis, or GPP, gross primary production, GPP, beyond a single leaf. That's because the GPP can be only directly measured at individual leaves, but beyond that, we don't know. However, the GPP is the largest carbon component, and that is the initial step that CO2 enters into the system, the ecosystem. So we need to understand what are the total budget of GPP, its variability, and its long-term trend. However, the issue is that there's no way to directly measure that. Even beyond the single leaf, but we want to know the global budget. So right now the approach is that the only the golden standard, our currently considered golden standard is that we try to partition the direct measurable called NEE, that is net CO2 exchange between atmosphere and the land, that's called NEE, which is to derive approach to partition NEE into the component fluxes, which is GPP, or photosynthesis, and the respiration. I'm going to show you equation later on. So this is this study is much driven by this paper published in Nature a few years ago, looking at the Harvard forest. But most of the studies working on NEE partitioning primarily focuses on natural systems. But here we would like to look at how this issue, how this issue looks like in agriculture systems. So at the canopy scale, when we look at this equation, this is NEE, that is net CO2 fluxes exchange between the land and the atmosphere. This can be directly measured by any eddy current system. There are two components contributing to NEE. One is called GPP, which is photosynthesis. This is unknown. And the other one is called ecosystem respiration, RECO here. This is also unknown. These two terms have opposite signs. So in order to so the problem here is like we have one known, but we have two unknowns here. But because these two components, GPP and respiration, they have different responses to external forces like climate and other disturbances. So we have to know the individual components and their distinct responses to environmental conditions in order to understand the future of the trajectory of these different components, and also the net CO2 exchanges. So the the SIF was considered as like the one of the breakthrough to be used as a direct tracer for photosynthesis. So here, if we can have a SIF that is directly measured by a system, and if we also can have a function like to model F, then we basically anchor GPP with another known. Then now we have two equations with two direct measurables and to solve two unknowns. So this is this issue has so that's our main strategy. We want to have two knowns with two equations to solve two unknowns. But the empirical, empirically, in the literature, the conventional approach is to use the SIF as a linear function with GPP, which, I mean, as a first step is a great exploration. But the issue is that the SIF and the GPP relationship can be biased, because here we first have to know GPP, which is already partitioned by this imprecise approach. So this is a biased SIF-GPP relationship. And also this is circular because the GPP itself is biased, and we use this biased relationship to do the back calculation of this partitioning. So this is circular. So our approach is that, say, can we have an independent function, which is F here, between SIF and GPP. So here, the GPP is independent from the existing GPP that is partitioned from NEE in order to avoid this circularity. So that's our main strategy. So now the issue is that because we don't have the true GPP at the canopy scale, that's why there's no way to directly validate the GPP and the partition of GPP and the respiration. So that's why we started from synthetic simulations, where we can simulate the true GPP and the true respiration and also the true NEE. So here, the top panel shows the SIF-based partitioning approach, and the bottom panel shows the daytime-based partitioning approach, which is the classical conventional approach without using SIF. From here, you can see this what this figure shows the partitioned residual for NEE. As you can see that there's the scatters are really around centers around zero, meaning there's no systematic residual bias of this of the NEE fitting. This is true for both the SIF-based approach and also daytime-based approach, but you can see this dependence as a function of VPD, the water vapor pressure deficit, if using the conventional approach. Even in this approach, the VPD effect is already explicitly considered in the fitting function. In our case, we didn't consider any VPD or other temperature or those environmental impact in our fitting equation. When we look at the GPP, more problems emerge. Say, for the conventional approach, there is a clear dependence of the partition residual as a function of VPD. In our case, this is insignificant. Such a dependence is insignificant. Basically, that means we don't have much of a bias. When we look at the partition respiration, again, when we look at this daytime-based approach, there's a systematic bias for the partitioned ecosystem respiration, which is not the case for the SIF-based partitioning. So here, the point is that minimizing the NEE residual, the fitting residual in this conventional approach does not necessarily lead to accurate component fluxes, just because these two components have opposite signs. It's impossible to resolve them with resolve two unknowns with one observable unless we have independent measurement that can anchor one of these measurements. So here our approach is with SIF in order to anchor GPP. Then we further did a bunch of sensitivity analysis. We look at whether our result holds under different LAI, leaf area index, and under different VPD, and under different diurnal courses of air temperature. And we found our pattern consistently holds under all these different varying environmental conditions. Now we move to the field measurements. Here, this figure shows the top panel shows the GPP and the bottom panel shows the ecosystem respiration. We look at the early growing stage, peak season, and also senescence. The legend are showing here. When we look at this, the respiration here, especially in the peak and senescence stage, we can clearly see this SIF-based approach can lead to lower daytime respiration, ecosystem respiration than daytime, which is not the case for other two partitioning approaches. And this finding is kind of consistent with the Nature paper I cited previously that use isotope-based approach to do the NEE partitioning at Harvard Forest, which showed exactly the same pattern that during daytime, the ecosystem respiration is lower than the nighttime. That is so-called Koch effect. At this point, we just found this consistent findings or consistent patterns, but we don't know if this is due to the so-called Koch effect. That means we need to really test our approach at other sites where concurrent measurement of the covariance of NEE and also SIF are conducted. Then we can determine whether this kind of pattern holds and why it holds, or whether this is due to Koch effect. So what is the implication here? We used both the synthetic simulations and the field measurement to demonstrate the differences and the benefits of using SIF to help the NEE partitioning. And this is the first evidence that showing the accuracy and the robustness of our approach. But when we look at the global scale, say this is FluxNet, and now there has been a growing number of fluorescence measurements across the globe. We can see the coverage, of course, not nearly as many as the other coherence sites across globe, but they are still emerging and growing. Say if we can apply this approach for the across the globe for all the sites with equipped with a safe instrument, then we can have a much better handle on the GPP budget and see how that compare with the conventional approaches. So that's the first project I would like to talk about. If there are no questions, I'm going to continue to talk about the second project and leave the questions at the end, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. So the second project is at a regional scale. So we try to monitor and assess the food, water, climate interactions for informing policy making. So this is the paper published earlier this year by my student. We try to look at the try to understand the underlying drivers for the long-term depletion of fresh water in northwestern China in this area. So why we are interested in this issue, this is motivated by a paper published, I think back in 2018. This is a classical paper that identify the global hotspot and cold spots of the total water storage from the GRACE satellite in the past couple of decades. So here you can see the mechanisms are identified and summarized in these with these different arrows here, and also denoted with different answered or confidence level. So what we are interested is actually in China. If we zoom in over here, in China, there are 3 hotspots. So one is in the northern China Plain, and this is in southern Tibetan Plateau, and this is in northwestern China here. So we see these 3 hotspots. When we zoom into this northwestern China, we can see this long-term depletion of the total water storage from GRIS data. The issue is that the magnitude of such a depletion in northwestern China is at the similar magnitude as the northern China plain and also South Tibetan Plateau. But in these two regions, the mechanisms are more or less clearly identified and understood, which is not the case in northern and western China, which right now is still under debate. But why this understanding the mechanism matters? Number one is because in this region, there is a high irrigation demand. When we look at this pie chart, we can see in this region, the agricultural water use accounts for 87% of the total water use. And when we look at this, the crop plant area in the past couple of decades, we can see this huge crop expansion in the past couple of decades. And the majority of this is actually driven by cotton because they have developed a really advanced technology for water saving so that they can grow a lot of cotton. And the cotton likes dry climate. And it's also important in this region is because there's like shrinking water sources from the Tian Shan Glacier Mountain here. Actually, the ultimate water source for the irrigation is actually from the glacier mountain from Tian Shan Mountain. The issue is that with global warming, the water resources in Tian Shan has been shrinking. The issue is that in the future, if the warming continues, there would be more water loss from the glacier melting. Now, where are the water source for irrigation coming from? So that's also an important issue. Third, in this region, this is a typical dry land system. When you look at this arid index, you can clearly see this is a very, very dry region. And when you look at the annual precipitation, which is lower than 20 centimeters per year, when you look at the PET, which is 10-fold higher than annual precipitation. So that means we need irrigation, and the irrigation must from external sources, and the ultimate source is from the Tian Shan Mountain glacier melting. So right now, the mechanism are under debate. There are a couple of hypotheses. Number one is that the glacier melting is the major cause for the regional scale water depletion. Of course, this is when you look at this land cover map, the red is the cropland, and this is a digital elevation model. Here, the ground area, meaning these are the mountain areas. So that means if there are more glacier melting, there are more water loss in the mountain area. So that means we can see a lot of the water depletion in these local mountain areas. So that's one of the hypotheses. The thing is that in this region, that's the melted water can't really flow out of this basin. It can only flow to the lowland, exactly because this basin is the endorheic basin. That's why the water can't really flow far away. Alternative hypothesis is that when we try to explain this regional-wide water depletion, once there is crop expansion, there would be increased irrigation, and then there would be more water loss through evapotranspiration, and that will lead to the total water storage depletion. Because the water loss through ET, that's just goes to the atmosphere. That's loss. That's why the water can get out of this basin. So we would like to test our hypothesis through this chain of this linkage. First, we would like to look at the crop expansion versus agricultural water use in this region. When we look at the crop coverage changes using satellite measurement, we clearly see this huge increase of the crop planted area. In the meantime, we'll also look at the statistical data from that's from the national survey. we can see that the crop area, which is the red line here, shows this huge increase in the past couple of decades. This is consistent with the crop land from the satellite measurement. This green line is from the same data from this one. And when we look at the total irrigation here, which is the red line here, we see, again, this is from National Statistics Surveys. We see this huge increase of the irrigated area. And also in the meantime, we see huge increase of the grain production. When we look at the agricultural water use, which is the green line here, again, we see this huge increase. And also the groundwater supply is also huge increase. Of course, in the recent few years, there's a decrease. I think that might be related to the increased irrigation use efficiency. But when we look at this figure, we look at the water use per unit area, or which is essentially equivalent to water use efficiency. We can clearly see the irrigation use efficiency. This green line has a huge increase, while the water use per crop area is decreasing, meaning the water use efficiency is increasing. But the issue is that even with this enhanced irrigation efficiency, the total amount of agricultural water use is still increased. So that is a problem. Now we would like to look at how the agricultural water use increase contribute to the ET growth, which means that's water loss through increased ET. Here, when we look at the ET trend from the GLEAM dataset, this is all satellite data driven product. We can clearly see this huge increase trend of ET during the same time period. Here, this is a trim precipitation data. We didn't see much of the trend. Then we look at the PDF distribution for the crop expansion area, which is the blue, and also other areas, which is the red. We can see that the crop expansion area has a much larger ET increasing trend than the rest area, which is not the case for the precipitation. So that means the crop expansion related ET increase can be attributed to changes in precipitation. So there must be other anthropogenic activities that drive this ET loss. So here, the last linkage is that how the ET growth led to the total water storage depletion. Here, we conducted a simple counterfactual analysis. We tried to reconstruct the total water storage using water balance equation. Here, this is our water balance equation. P is precipitation, this is ET, this is runoff, this is the total water storage, and the changes of total water storage, that's the delta S divided by delta T. What we're trying to do is that, say, if we remove the ET trend, that is observe the ET trend, and then reconstruct this equation so that we can get the delta T divided by delta S divided by delta T. So what we found is that, say, okay, so this is the total ET trend, right? And we try to see this blue line is after the trending of this ET trend, and then we plug the ET back to this equation, now we get this blue line. This red line is from the observations or before the trend, or this is our baseline. So we see that after removing this ET trend, the long-term changes of the terrestrial water storage just disappear. You can still see this negative trend, but it's not significant anymore. So that means if there's no ET increasing trend, there would be no significant total water storage depletion in this area. Then our conclusion is that when we try to look at this issue as like a regional-wide issue, it's all about the crop expansion that led to this total water storage. That means the water use is not sustainable in northwestern China. So hopefully this can have some implications for the policymaking in that local area. Okay. This is my group, and the two projects are led by Oscar and also Jiameng Wai. They have been so hardworking to get these two papers done. So yeah, I guess that's all I have. I probably spoke too fast, but we still have more time to ask questions. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Ying. I'll just open it up. Does anybody have any questions for Ying? So Ying, I have one question for you regarding SIF. So so more and more SIF tower-based observations are being deployed across the Ameriflux network. Do you think greater expansion of that has the potential to improve the NEE partitioning, or do you think using satellites would be good enough?
That's that's a good question. So I think depending on our end goal. So if we want to do the partitioning to understand, to get like a new golden standard of what are the true GPP at individual sites, I think we need to do this at individual site level. But if you want to get like global budget or regional budget, probably we don't even need that many sites. So I think it's really depending on our the scientific goal here. I would say if we have more in situ measurement that's in these Ameriflux site, that will enable us to understand the GPP and the SIF coupling on their different time scales, because the GPP and the SIF relationship can easily break at a shorter time scale, and they can easily break under stress. So in that case, we need this continuous and high frequency measurement in order to understand their relationships, under what time scale, under what environmental conditions their relationships break. So that's something satellite measurements can help us, because it's the resolution is still low, and the spatial resolution is low, temporal resolution is low, and it's relatively still noisy. So there are a lot of issues that we have to work on in order to fully utilize satellite, or to make the satellite measurement of SIF to be useful to understand the mechanisms. Yeah, of course, there are already a lot of studies utilizing satellite SIF to explain some, the variability or trend related issues. But we have to take a grain of salt for those findings, because we have to understand the data uncertainties. It's just noisy, and the instruments are not perfect. There are long-term degradation of the instrument, and the data quality is not spatially uniform. So for example, in Amazon region, the data quality is more of an issue than say cropland or deciduous temporal forest. So that means there are data gaps in Amazon, well, in tropical rainforest and also in high latitude. And probably you can see from the global map that there are data gaps in those regions. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, so we're making measurements down in Iquitos in the Amazon. It's been a very challenging environment to work in. Obviously, all satellite-based data are difficult because of the cloud cover. Do you think tower-based SIF systems could withstand sort of that type of humid and very, very wet environment?
Yeah, we have to really do a good job in maintaining the tower. Like in our system, like here, we are also suffering from like the humidity. So yeah, we just have to really try hard to make sure the system is stable under those high humidity conditions. Yes, it is always challenging. So when I was talking about the data uncertainty, yeah, data uncertainty exists in satellite data, but also in in situ measurement. And I think what we found is that with exactly the same system here, we tested different retrieval approaches. They can lead to very different results. So that means that the choice of retrieval method matters a lot. And also the configuration of the in situ system also matters a lot, whether you have hemispherical integrated sensor or it's just a bare fiber, they all matters a lot. And also the height or the distance between the sensor and the canopy top, which is also matters a lot. I would say that would be more of an issue in Amazon region because of even that the short distance, but the atmospheric column is just humid. So that if we use O2A band for retrieval, it's going to give you huge trouble. So that's why we're more recommending using Fraunhofer line-based approach, which can to some degree mitigate the water vapor issue in the atmosphere column, even for the in situ measurements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
I have a question. Hi, Dr. Sun.
Yeah, hello.
Brandy Toner, I'm a professor in the department. We have many grad students on participating as audience members in your seminar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm outside of your field, but I was curious about how your group composition works. It looks like you're doing field observations and data retrievals and modeling. Yeah. And I was curious, do your students do all of those things in their projects, or do you have students focusing on one aspect of that work?
Yes. So that's a good question. So each of them, they are taking lead on one single project. Every one of them is doing something different. For example, this is Christine Chang, who she was a postdoc in my lab, and now as a scientist in USDA, she has been leading our field measurement and also field instrument design, both the tower-based fluorescence and also UAV-based fluorescence. And now, after he left the group, my new student Sun Zhong Li is taking the field work, and he is I think he's the only one leading all the field work, but of course with some help from summer interns. Jimei, she was a postdoc. She has been leading on the leaf level measurement. So we maybe I can show you something here. We try to use our leaf level measurement to develop new theories that balance light reaction and the carbon reaction models. So the carbon reaction model, that's from the classical Farquhar model developed like 4 decades ago. And we are trying to, but that model is highly uncertain, and that is carbon reaction centric. So that's why we are, so like Jimei, she has been taking hundreds of measurements in our Cornell Botanical Garden, and then fitting all those ACI curves and get all the photosynthetic parameters and fluorescent parameters in order to validate our model and our theory. So that's at the leaf level. Like Kara, he has been leading the partitioning project that's at the canopy scale. And he's also trying to develop this scalable approach using satellite measurement of fluorescence to estimate the crop yield, which I was planning to present that part today, but I thought I can't cover that with the allotted time, but probably I was wrong. So like Jiaming, he is more working on like the natural systems to understand the global trend and also interannual variability of the terrestrial ecosystems using both bottom-up based the CO2 measurements and also top-down based measurement. And like this student Jiameng Lai is leading on like that water depletion project, and now she's leading another project on OCS flux. I talked to Tim before, because that is another, OCS is another photosynthetic tracer for GPP. So yeah, they are working on different things. Like Sun Zhong now is the field lead, and Zhen Qi is another student. He is working on the neon data, using the neons at the current data and also airborne data to understand how we can use the fluorescence to understand the GPP, and also with evapotranspiration. This assay is working on data simulation using uncard COM by integrating the fluorescence, LAI, soil moisture, and a LiDAR to improve the land variable simulations by COM. So like everyone is taking a lead on different projects, but they do collaborate to some extent in terms of like data sets, in terms of some modeling tools they developed. But we see this the spectrum scale, like GMA is more on the leaf scale, and Christine and Zhen Qi, they are more on the canopy scale, and we have like regional and global scale led by Oz, Jiaming, and also Jiameng. So yeah, they have like the topic is different and the scale is different, but yeah, they help each other a lot as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a real team approach. I was just thinking that no one student could be, or postdoc could be expert in all of the things you were doing. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, Ying, we have a question from a student, Kushal. He says, it's a great talk. I would like to know how ET is calculated, and how does the uncertainty in ET potentially affect the trend in TWS?
Yeah, that is a great question. So here our ET is from the GLEAM data. Where's the GLEAM? Okay, here, that's the GLEAM data. So GLEAM data, that is, they basically use water balance equation, quite simple, and take different satellite measurement, including soil moisture, and also I think they also have other like precipitation and other data sets in order to constrain their water balance. Then I think they can calculate the ET. Yeah, their ET, yeah, it has uncertainties, and we did look at other ET product. Other ET product, like we look at ET from ERA 5 reanalysis. We also look at a product developed by a Korea group. We also look at Modis ET product, and the different product can show the different trend, but they all show this decreasing trend, although the magnitude can be different. So that is one challenge that we try to resolve. Well, we discuss a lot in our paper of how the ET uncertainties can influence our final conclusion. The issue is that we don't know the truth of ET. It's exactly the same problem as GPP. We don't know the true ET at the regional scale. So that's why we are trying to look at different satellite products and to see to what degree we can have this consistency across different products. But to me, it's the challenge is always what are the true magnitude and what are the true trend. We don't know. We just know like the qualitatively their consistency across the different products. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Ying. Yes, he says yes.
Yeah.
So any other questions?
I can ask a question. There's a question from the audience, Tim. What, just talking to here? Or? Okay, so hi, thanks for the great talk. Really learned a lot. I was more interested in some of the policy things based on your second study, water depletion. Have you done any calculations on what land area can be irrigated sustainably, or you know, what maybe the policy changes might be in the future? Thanks.
Yeah, that is actually a really good question, but that is a hard question to answer. So in China, the policy can be very different. So a few years ago, there was a policy that tries to try to move all the crop growth to the northwestern China, so that they are to leave more better lands in the inland area for larger industry related activities. But that is highly unsustainable, because so the rationale for that policy is that there are just huge bare land over there that we can use to grow crops, but it's just like the water, like what are the total amount of water, that is something we don't know. And that area is a very sensitive area, like politically we don't have any in situ data over there, so that's why we can only use the satellite measurement and the very limited national scale surveys. But we would really like to have some like groundwater, but there are some militaries over there. And also that area is, there are other countries involved. So the 3 countries actually compete the water. So there are some like international water rights going on there. So it's a politically very sensitive area. So in terms of policy making, it's not only about like the local scale, but also nationally and internationally. So we would really like to have more data to help us go one step further, but the limitation is, again, the data. We don't have the data. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
good.
Any final questions? Okay, Ying, I want to thank you for taking the time to present today. It was very interesting, and look forward to seeing more of your work on the partitioning and some of your OCS work.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Tim. Yeah, thank you,
you.
everyone. Yeah.